Today is June 12th, 2008, and we're sitting with Jody Heavner outside of Pittsville, Illinois. How are you doing today, Jody?
Just fine.
Great. We're going to start out with asking you some of the easy questions.
Okay.
If you could kind of give us your date of birth and the place you were born.
Okay, I was born March 5th, 1970 in Pittsfield, Illinois.
Okay. Now, has your family always lived in Pittsville?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this, where we're sit right now, was actually homesteaded and signed over to our family in the 1800s. So yeah, we've been here a long time.
Wow, okay. Now, when we say your family's been here, is that your immediate family, extended family?
It's my immediate family, my parents, yes, okay. and their parents before them, so my mother's side.
Now, did your parents have any brothers and sisters?
No, it's actually my mother's family, and she was an only child.
Wow.
So.
Okay. So what kind of memories do you have of living here as a child?
A lot. Well, obviously, this is the farm where I was born and raised, and this office was the house where I was raised. And when I was young, we had all different types of livestock in addition to grains and crops. We had, like everyone did back then, it was more the traditional farm where you had a little bit of everything. You know, we had cattle and we had hogs and we had sheep, and the 4-H projects, rabbits and chickens and whatever else. So all the memories that I think that most of us think about when we think about growing up on a farm are probably the same kinds of ones that I share with a lot of people.
Cool.
So.
What about, your grandparents were here.
Mm-hmm.
Where were they living in relation to you?
And my grandparents actually, there was a house that stood just behind us prior to this one being built, and that's the house they lived in when they farmed the ground. My grandfather actually passed away at the age of 42, and my grandmother and my mother stayed here on the farm for a while and then moved to town, and then when Mom married, they moved back out here.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now, do you know of any of your family history of how they came to Illinois?
Actually, one of the things on the wall over here is and my mother's maiden name is Willard, and we've had family members who've spent a lot of time and done a lot of genealogical study of our family, and have it traced it back to England and the parts of England from which they came. So, the members of that side of my family have been here since the early 1800s and before that, some of them. So. My grandfather came from a very large family, and his family before that had been here. They just had made their way to Illinois. So
Great.
It goes back many generations.
Very cool. Now, you said you have many memories of your childhood
yes.
on this farm, and tell me some of your memories about doing chores.
Well, again, I probably share the same memories a lot of people do share with me as well. I'm one of 3 children. I have an older brother, Doug, and a younger sister, Lori. So much like most kids, and I have 3 sons of my own, and we live on a farm, so I'm reliving those moments as a parent now. But, we had, excuse me, like I said, we had beef cows. We always had a herd of beef cows, and one of my favorite things to do was to go with my dad down to check the cows every day and, ride along with him. And he always talks about when he would leave me. My mom was a nurse and worked nights a lot, so when she'd come home and she'd sleep during the day and then get up and help on the farm. So he would, he was the babysitter / farmer. So we were always with him when Mom was sleeping. So he'd take me down and he'd set me in the big feed troughs and walk the pasture to check cows, and I'd sit there and play with them. So. As far as, having been around the animals, it's just literally been all my life. We, at one time, had almost 400 head of sheep here, so that was a lot of work and a lot of fun. The chores really do teach a sense of responsibility, and there's nothing better than that to do that for you. We used to show our livestock. We'd spend our summers doing that when we were teenagers, and that was a great learning and growing experience. And again, teaching responsibility and meeting lifelong friends that I have that live all over the country now from having done that I would never have met otherwise. So I have a lot of really good memories.
What was the one chore that you did that you just hated?
Oh, that's an easy one. When I was, we built this building when I was 4, and prior to that, we lived in the house that sat just to the south of here, and that house was there for a while after we built this one. And we had rabbits for 4-H. And those rabbits, their hutches were just on the other side of where that house sat. And there was a big tree there. And it was one of those things that as a kid during the summer or any other time of year, you'd put off as long as you could what you needed to do. And feeding the rabbits was one of the things I needed to do. And one of the things I liked doing least, because I was convinced every time I was told it was dark, I needed to go feed, that going around that house, something terrible is going to happen to me. So I hated doing it. I was just like, it's one of those things, you just know the boogeyman's going to come out and get you. Never did, obviously. But just going around there to feed the rabbits because I hadn't done what I was supposed to when it was dark was probably the thing that I liked the least. The rest of it, we had, there was a lot of things we did. Always enjoyed working with the cattle or working with the sheep, any of that kind of thing. But for whatever reason, I loved the rabbits. I just didn't like, going there after dark to deal with them for some reason. So.
Yeah. Now you said that there's you and you have a brother
yes,
that's
I do.
Older and a sister that's younger.
Yes.
Now were there certain chores that your brother was able to do or was supposed to do that the girls weren't supposed to do?
Well, it was less about gender and more about age. He's my older brother, so there were things, a lot of things with the equipment and things like that he did because he was older and bigger, and it made more sense. So that's kind of, and then when he left home, and then I was doing some of the things that he was doing when he was here. So it was kind of a natural progression. So I would say, I guess I would say yes and no, but it was just more about who was older and bigger and more able to do it at any given time. So just whatever chores suited that person was kind of what we did. So.
Well, that's cool. We talked a lot about being on the farm. What about friends from off the farm? Friends from off the farm.
Well, living in a rural community, a lot of my friends were from farms. So, it was probably a pretty even mix of friends that were from a farm and friends that weren't. And it's always fun to bring someone who's not from a farm down, and there are always things that they find mildly disturbing or somewhat distressing when they're not used to things on a farm, things that you don't think about other people do, so it's just kind of one of those. So yeah, we always had a good mix, but this is a very rural community, so even if they didn't live on a farm, their grandparents did, or their aunt and uncle did, or someone in their family did, and they spent time there.
Do you have a story about a particular friend that, came to the farm with you and saw something they didn't like, or were just amazed by something?
Honestly, most of my friends, not really. My sister always had friends that seemed like they were the ones that were just not didn't understand the farm, didn't understand why it didn't bother you to walk through a barn that had manure in it, the smell was horrible, that kind of thing. So no different than I think most, especially kids that age, girls that are younger girls that just think it's gross or whatever. But yeah, I think her friends are probably the set that was least adapted to it, I guess would be the best way to say that. But my friends were all pretty laid back about it. They didn't, not much bothered them. So.
Yeah. Now it sounds like you're very involved in 4-H as a child.
Yes, I was.
Can you expand a little bit about your involvement?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, 4-H is a big part of our lives growing up. Obviously, again, being from a rural community, programs and programming for youth is not, there isn't much. And at that time, there were sports, but not until you got into junior high. So there was the whole span of time where what is there for a kid to do? And 4-H was the logical choice because it was an ag community and we were all really involved. So yeah, as kids, we were all very involved in 4-H. It's a fantastic program. I have a lot of very fond memories from 4-H. The leaders that my 4-H leaders, the youth development people I worked with here in the county, taking exchange trips to other states and staying with families for a week, going to conferences and conventions, things like that. It's a big part of probably, it's another kind of piece to my puzzle as to why I stayed involved in agriculture. because it kind of gave me a chance to be with other people who had a similar interest, and that was as a kid. And I'm still very involved. My own children are in 4-H. I'm right now the president of our extension council here in the county, so I'm still very involved in 4-H now. So that was a part of it, and then FFA came later. So.
Oh, okay. So you were also involved in FFA.
I was in high school, yes.
About that sort of stuff. Okay.
Well, it's kind of, actually I spent the day yesterday at the convention in Springfield. That's why I was out. It was again, just a natural progression. You're in 4-H. I had a very heavy interest in livestock. The cattle and the sheep at the time were my big interests, and that was a logical outlet. We had an amazing teacher here in Pittsfield who was here for many, many years and built an outstanding program. He's a gentleman everyone just called Chief. And yeah, it was a lot of good memories.
Cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Now, I know with 4-H and stuff, you get to do different projects and stuff. What are some of your favorite projects?
Well, the sheep at the time was the thing that we did the best. And the nice thing about them as livestock is that even a smaller kid or a younger child can do the chores, can handle the animals by themselves, and you still have that same sense of responsibility, and you understand the life cycle and the growth cycle, and you understand the nutrition and the genetics, and you can learn all that. I have a deep love for beef cattle, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to do on the side now. But that was really when we were growing up, that was the thing that we spent a lot of time doing, and that was by far my favorite project, and was really the thing that got me really involved in livestock was sheep projects.
Now you're a mother that's also involved in her kids' 4-H.
Yes.
What kinds of projects are your kids doing?
Beef cattle, photography, woodworking. I have 3 sons, 2 of which are old enough to be in 4-H, so that's their focus right now. We've done chickens and rabbits and ducks, and yeah.
Cool. Well, how has the 4-H program changed from when you were involved compared to now what you see with your children? Well,
at first I thought it seemed like it had changed a lot. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. Within our county, the leaders in our county work very hard. We're kind of trying to take things full circle and kind of get it back a little more structured, a little more hands-on than what it had been for a while. There's a lot of very active parents who are my age who now have children who are 4-H members, and trying to bring kind of some back of what we had. So I think, there have been changes, but we still do. There's still 4-H records. We do workshops. We go to monthly meetings. They give speeches. They show at the fair, and then we show at the state fair, and all those things that I did as a kid, they still do. So there have been changes, but we're very lucky here within the county to have a pretty good set of volunteers who've been able to fill in some of the gaps that have been left at our extension office, I guess.
Now, it seems like with rural communities, there's always some kind of involvement with church.
Yes.
And, how has that played a role in your life?
And I think you're right. I think in rural communities that oftentimes is something, and it played a big role in my life. I actually went to church my childhood, just right up the road in Time. There's a small church there, Time Community Christian Church, and that's where we went every Sunday. Mom played the piano, and even if she'd worked the night before, she was there Sunday morning to play the piano. Currently, we go to church in Milton, my family and I do, at the Christian church there. We're very involved in that church. We have a very active youth group, and even in a small community of no more than 300, our youth group meets twice a month, and we'll have anywhere between 20 and 40 kids there. I take care of the junior high. I'm in charge of junior high, and I'll have anywhere between 8 and 12 on any Sunday night that will come and do things. So that's, again, something that I think it's kind of coming full circle, because there was a while where that wasn't the case, but now it's more the norm than not. And that's changed a lot. Probably here within the county, it's changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded that it's not just church, you're doing other things as well with church. What are some of those other activities that are going on
with the church.
Social activities.
It's our county has the ministers and pastors within the county have actually formed an alliance, and they actually refer to it as that, where regardless of denomination, they all meet together weekly. They eat breakfast together every week. They have all become close, fast friends. We actually, this past Sunday evening, had a gathering with a church from Pittsfield down in Milton, and we played softball and had a cookout and raised money for Relay for Life. Our minister has given sermons at their church and vice versa. It's very interesting. And it's bringing a lot more people into it. I think there was a time where, and probably back in my childhood and farther back, where if you went to this church, that's a church you went to, and they did things their way and you did things your way. But now I find it very interesting that they have decided that it's not really about that. We all read the same Bible, so there's no reason to not fellowship together and do things together. And that, honestly, has made a big change here within the county within the last 3 or 4 years. It's been very interesting to watch.
That's really neat. Now, have there been, it sounds like the majority of people are for this alliance and this coming together, but have there been some people that kind of, through the process, were...
I can't really speak to that. I know that within our own congregation, everyone has, you can see this, you can see it, you can see the signs of it. Within the schools and places like that, you can see that there's a difference. So I think there may have been. I can't say for sure that there weren't, but certainly within our own congregation, I think everyone's it's something that we all see as a very good thing. We have activities. If we have youth activities, we have lock-ins. I took a group of junior high kids to St. Louis for a conference, and we invited, it was open to anybody. So we took kids that went to other churches. There's a church in town that has youth activities every Wednesday evening, and kids from all denominations go there to hang out on a Wednesday night, but might worship somewhere else on Sunday morning. So it has really changed. It is really, and from that, all the churches have seen growth. So it's not that just one has. It's been a very interesting change.
No, that's exciting.
Well, it is. It really is. It's. I think at a time where so many other places you don't see that. And I'm not sure where the thought or idea came from to do that. But speaking as someone, like I said, who has 3 kids in the school system and am involved, in their lives through, coaching soccer and the people in the community. It's very interesting that is the case now.
I'm sure it is. And what about when you went to school here? Going to a rural school is kind of different in terms, comparing it to an urban school. Can you kind of tell us about your experience going to school?
Sure. Well, we live outside of Pittsfield, and we attended school all the years in Pittsfield, which meant a ride on the bus every day, an hour to school and an hour home, which that's really where you get all of your education when you're a child, is the school bus. The things that happen between the bus rides are irrelevant most times. I think anyone who ever spent much time riding a bus probably learned more than they needed to. But no, small schools are a great thing. My husband and I had been gone for many years, and one of the reasons we wanted to move back to the Pike County back home was obviously to be near our families because we're both from here, but also that same small school atmosphere where people watch out for each other's kids, and that's a really nice thing to have. But I wouldn't change anything about it. It's the small community where your friends' parents are your teachers, and it definitely makes you pay a little more attention to how you behave on a day-to-day basis, that's for sure. But, I think a lot of people assume that there are a lot of downsides to smaller schools. They may not offer, especially as, students get older and get to high school, they may not offer AP courses or, an expanded curriculum in foreign language. We have Spanish in town, but that's all that we have right now. So there are drawbacks to that, but, I think there's also a lot of benefit to it.
What are some of the ways that, at least when you went to school, that your school was trying to cope with some of those drawbacks?
Well, I think back, and at the time, we were really no different than a lot of other schools in the area, I guess. Now there's, obviously, like so many areas, there's been a lot of consolidation, and that was taking place while I was going through school. A lot of the smaller towns, Milton, Pearl, Nebo, all had their own schools, and from the time I started in kindergarten, the time I graduated high school, they'd all consolidated, and those kids all graduated with me, including my husband. He attended school in Pearl in grade school. That grade school closed, and he went to Milton and attended through 8th grade, and then came to Pittsfield for high school as the schools merged and closed. So it was one of those things that it was less about coping with trying to find ways to meet student needs, and just more about getting to a baseline. Okay, we're going to bring these students in. Then we'll determine how to best meet their needs. And over time, they were able to offer, a wider variety of sports. But course offerings haven't changed much from when I was in high school to what they are now, because the enrollment hasn't changed much. So.
What about? I mean, your kids are going to school, and I'm sure you know what they're doing.
Or I hope so.
Maybe.
I like to think I do.
What is the school trying to do to overcome that issue of not being able to offer, multiple languages and things like that?
Well, we work once they get to the high school level. We're in the John Wayne Community College District, and we have actually an open learning center here in Pittsfield where there are open learning classes offered, as well as evening or day classes and things like that. So working with them, it does offer kids, they can take college course credit for some things that can't be offered at the schools in Pittsfield. So that's one way in working with the junior college. They're able to kind of expand the course offering and get kids what they need. And that's probably the biggest thing that they've done and that's certainly helped.
Yeah, that's cool.
Dual credit for some things like that.
Now, I mean, you just said you grew up in the era of when the schools were consolidating. That's how you met your husband, I'm guessing.
Actually, yes, we went to high school together, yes.
So, how was that during that time? No longer are you just going with Pittsfield kids, or with just Pittsfield kids, but other kids from other areas and things like that.
It's really interesting because you don't think, I guess I didn't think much about it at the time. And a lot of us didn't, because we had always gone to Pittsfield. So for us, it really wasn't a big deal for those other kids to come to our school. It didn't, we knew a lot of them anyway, because it's a small area, and when you're in junior high and you play basketball against each other, or you run track together, so you get to know each other anyway. So for us, it didn't seem like a big deal, that they were there. But it's funny, when we talk to my husband about it, he talks about his freshman year, coming into a new school, having not been with us all those years. I think you don't really realize at the time what that's like for those kids going through that. So that's been really interesting for me. And we'll talk about it now, all these years later. He says, that was by far the roughest year, because you come in and you don't know anybody, and whether it's your own perception or what actually happened. It was pretty rough on a lot of those kids, I think. So it's kind of interesting.
Now, I can imagine that there's probably quite a few kids in Pittsfield that are kind of more town kids.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you were bringing a lot of country kids into this school as well.
Right.
Was there kind of a country kid, town kid kind of
rivalry? Oh yeah. And we actually all laugh about that. We all have kids same age and that kind of thing now, and those that still live down here, and we actually laugh about that kind of thing a lot, because even today, there are the town kids, and then there are the country kids, and the country kids are the ones that probably went to school in Milton or wherever else versus Pittsfield, and so there's still some of that, and we still laugh about it. It's actually something that everyone still jokes about. But yeah, at the time there definitely was the town kid versus the country kid, and whether it was trying out for basketball, and the town kids had always played in Pittsfield, and then you bring in kids from Milton or Pearl to play, and suddenly the town kids sitting on the bench and the country kids playing. It's no different than anything else. Yeah, there's definitely some rivalry there, and some kids who probably didn't appreciate it at the time, I'm sure, to say the least.
No, that's pretty cool. Now, your farming career really started when you were born, and you grew up on the farm doing a lot of work. But you also went to school.
Yes, I did.
And I'm talking about college, for ag-related
yes
degrees. Can you tell me kind of what degrees did you go get?
I'd be happy to. I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in animal science. My master's was focused on muscle biology and meat science. So that's my educational background as far as that goes. Again, you know, my interest in ag all the time growing up is what really led me to that. My involvement in FFA, especially once I hit high school, really was probably what ended up leading me down that path. I knew that was my interest, and I just followed up on that. But my parents were adamant that we all leave the farm and get a college education. There was no staying here. It was not an option. So from birth we were told, you will go and you will get an education or join the military, but you will not stay here. If you want to come back someday, that's fine, but you need to go out and see things, and we all did. So
it's interesting. And now you and your brother have come back
Yes.
to the farm?
Yes.
And what about your younger sister?
No.
Really?
Yeah, she's 5 years younger than I am, which makes her 7.5 younger than my brother. Yeah, my brother and I were, and she, don't get me wrong, she, obviously raised in the same farm, the same house, that kind of stuff, but, not everybody has the same interests, and it's not hers, and she loves to come back and visit, and she enjoys she has 2 girls, and they like to get out, and they like to come visit, and pet my son's cows, or do whatever, but that kind of thing, but she actually lives in Bloomington and teaches at Downs at Tri-Valley, and her husband owns a sign company in Bloomington, and they live there.
Okay.
So
now, leaving the farm and going into college life has got to be kind of it's probably quite a drastic change.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things, and I've been talking to some friends about that lately. That's a very big school, and you kind of have to know who you are when you go there, or you're going to get lost in the shuffle. And I know that the way that I was raised and the things that I did and the confidence I built in high school did not make it wasn't that big of a deal for me to go do that. I loved it there, and I wouldn't have thought that because I was just like, I never want to live in a big town, but I got over there, and you meet kids with similar interests and build relationships with them, and it becomes your home. And that's what I did, and I absolutely loved going to school there. So I guess in some ways, it was drastic. Yeah, there's more people, there's more cars. Finding a place to park is virtually impossible, and the people at university parking become your best friend because you get mail from them every day about the ticket that you got. But other than that, it was a big change to an extent. But even in a place like that, you have as long as you find someone with a similar interest, it doesn't make it that. It doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. I guess it wasn't to me anyway. I enjoyed it.
You just went right through and got your master's immediately after your undergrad?
I did. I have a strange educational background. I did my bachelor's in animal science and went straight to graduate school after that. And while working on my master's degree, I then took a job for the university, kind of as an independent contractor doing work for Eli Lilly and Co. On a drug trial. And so while I was doing my master's degree, I did that as well, and ran some research for them there at the university. So that was something that I did after that. And then while I was finishing that, after I finished my master's, I decided that my husband and I, both with master's degrees, finding jobs in our respective areas of study, I probably needed to have a little more leeway. And I found out while I was in graduate school as a teaching assistant that I loved to teach. So I took the coursework I needed to be certified to teach high school so that no matter where we ended up, I would have that to fall back on. So that's the other part of my education, is that I'm also then certified to teach.
So did you teach anywhere?
I did. I taught, we stayed in the Champaign area for, well, it was a total of 10 years between college and work. We stayed there for a while. With his job, we moved to Monmouth, Illinois, and I taught high school at a small school. It was Union Biggsville then. It's since consolidated. They had an ag program there. It had been closed for about 10 years, and I went there and I reopened the ag program and started an FFA chapter going, and did that while I was there.
Oh, wow.
And actually, in August, I'm going to start teaching high school here at Pittsfield.
Oh, well, great.
So,
great. What's what's leading you to making that decision to go back and start teaching
a
again?
lot of things. Since I've been here and doing what I'm doing, I actually have taught part-time for Johnwood Community College. We have they have an actual ag center located north of Perry, and it's a great teaching facility. So since I've been back here, it's kind of been what I've done. During one semester, I teach a couple courses there because, like I said, I found out that was what I really enjoyed doing. So this opportunity came open, and I gave it a lot of thought. My sons are coming up. I'm going to go through school, and that actually made my decision harder because I don't know how my life would have changed had I had my mother for my ag teacher and FFA advisor. But yeah, it's been interesting. I've had a lot of support from the community encouraging me to do it. Our program has not been what it once was, and they'd like to see it headed back in the right direction. So come fall, I'll be doing that for a while and see how that goes.
So what courses are your favorite to teach?
Oh, because of my love of animal science and livestock, I love teaching anything, and actually that spreads over the crop side too, the science behind the ag stuff. And I think that's something that people still think, and here within the community as well, because of the way the courses have been taught, parents say, well, my kid's not going to go into ag. It doesn't offer them anything, and that's really not true anymore. Yeah, there's the production side of things that we teach, but a lot of it also goes back to the science side, and I really enjoy teaching the business side of it as well. Everything from, life cycles and, of plants and, everything that you can see, it all goes back to the same place. And it's just, for me, I love being able to help kids make the connection between what they may have learned in first grade science to what's happening in the fields that they pass on their way to school in their truck. Or taking a town kid that you talked about earlier and making them actually understand that really their life's not a lot different than the kid sitting next to them, and kind of bringing appreciation, despite the fact they're in a rural community surrounded by agriculture and their parents or their grandparents might farm, they may not truly appreciate the science behind it. And ag is such a science-based, it's all science-based. So kind of bringing that component to it is a lot of fun for me. For kids that say, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's not as easy as what it's not as simple as what it appears.
That's really neat. Now let's talk about the ranch here.
Yes.
And kind of what you're doing here. Mm-hmm. Now this was the farm that you grew up on. And
right.
It sounds at least like it was a fairly diverse farm.
Yes.
At the time you were growing up, what was here? It was
cattle, sheep, hogs, and corn and soybeans. Yeah.
And now it sounds like you're doing more with elk.
Yes.
And it sounds like you have some cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you grow any crops here?
We have a small amount of ground that we actually lease to a neighbor to farm. And we have some ground we use for pasture and for hay production. But right now, here on this farm, it's the elk and the cattle that we do.
Now, I mean, you had the cattle. What kind of cattle do you raise?
Simmental and Simmental Angus Cross are the primary breeds.
And those are raised for beef production?
Yes.
Primarily? And then how many head do you have?
Here on this farm right now, we'll have about 60 head. Not a lot, just a small herd.
Okay. Now, where in the decision-making process did you get to elk?
That's a whole other long, involved story. It goes back to when my brother went off to college and then I went off to college. And my parents always say once we left, so did the labor force. That's kind of how they see that, because when you raise livestock, it's very labor intensive. So the decision then was to scale back on the livestock. And my father, who my mother always says, and she's not wrong, thinks like an animal. In that the way that he understands very well the way an animal will react in any given situation. And that led to getting involved in livestock equipment and handling equipment. designing it, selling it, those kinds of things. So he started kind of doing that on the side and actually working for someone else who did that and, selling it for him and that kind of thing. And then it kind of went from there to doing it themselves. And in that transition, they discovered that, there have always been people that kind of catered to beef cattle or hogs or whatever those animals are, and they were doing that as well, but decided that there was this large, at the time there was a big need for someone to deal with exotic livestock and exotic animals. And the decision was then made to, let's see what we can do to kind of fill that niche or that role, because you think about it, it doesn't sound like a very big niche or role, but if no one's doing it, then it's there to be done. So that's kind of where it started. Designing and selling and finding other people who designed and fabricated this equipment and getting it in the hands of people who needed it, whether they raised buffalo, elk, deer, kangaroos, wallabies, emus, ostriches, spider monkeys, the works. That's kind of where the involvement in that industry started. And then from it just kind of, as Mom always says, one thing led to another. And so then it's like, well, if we're selling this equipment to these people and we think that it works, and, so they got a few head of elk and that, designed some handling systems and saw how it worked. And so it just all kind of grew from there.
Huh. Well, that's really an interesting story how you got there.
You asked. Yeah.
There's got to be some pretty big differences between handling cattle and handling elk. Can you tell us about some of the
There are. Despite the fact that our elk are obviously born and raised on the farm, they are not what I would refer to at all as a domesticated animal. We feed them every day. They're in a pen behind a tall 8-foot fence, but they still have the wild instinct. So it makes handling them a much different situation. And in fact, when we have employees or I have people that come to help, I actually prefer a lot of times someone who doesn't have any experience handling beef cattle, because they don't tend to be patient enough. These animals, they kind of work on their own time frame. And if you're used to working with hogs or beef cattle, you can kind of force them into doing what you want them to do as a domesticated animal. As far as, and I'm talking about things as simple as moving them from one pen to the other. You can get in the pen and you can get several of you in there and you can, holler out, yell at them, and they'll eventually move, things like that. Elk, it's a different story. They have to move on their own in their own time frame. So you devise ways to make that happen. You connect pens with lanes and alleys and put gates in places where the animals will congregate, and then if you want to get them in the next morning, then you have gates open a day or two ahead of time, and you'll put the feed and water in there, and then you'll hope that they'll find their way there. And then if they don't, hopefully they've at least seen that the gate is open and been through it, and then they'll be willing to go in it later. It takes patience to do those things, and so. Yeah, that's one of the bigger differences. They also have their fight or flight instinct is very much intact. You'll see them hold their heads up, and they're smelling the wind and constantly watching around them. So it's if there's a weather front coming through, or if the wind's coming from the wrong direction, we'll have no work. We'll have no luck getting them to work the way we want to that day, because if the wind's coming from the wrong direction, we need to be behind them. Then they're not gonna. They'll scatter. So it's amazing. They're fascinating animals. They really are, because of that.
Now, I've been doing some reading on elk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out now. They are considered livestock or wild animals?
Yes. It depends upon who you ask. Well, they are still wild animals. Within the state of Illinois, they fall in the jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture. So it's confusing from that standpoint where they fall. But they are still, they are still wild animals, wild instinct. I guess, to me, it's more about, are they a wild animal or are they a domesticated animal? So they are a wild animal, in my opinion, being raised domestically, if that makes any sense at all. We raise them for the same purposes that you would raise other livestock. So I guess from that standpoint, yes, they would be considered livestock. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's a better way to answer that.
That's interesting. Now, how many elk do you have here now?
Well, it depends upon the day. We'll range somewhere with the locations that we have, somewhere between, in that 200 to 250 head range.
Wow. Now, they're not all here.
Right. We've got different
areas.
Locations, yeah.
Can you explain like the different locations and
kind of well, here we sit here at the office. We've got a few different pens that we're actually right now this time of year. It's it's June, so it's calving season, and that's what we call them. The males are bulls, the females are cows, the babies are calves. So we keep those groups here close to the office and check those pens every day, and that's a whole other thing we can talk about in a minute. We have another area that we basically use for raising the young ones, and it's set up similar to what a feedlot would be set up for cattle, where they're in smaller pens, which allows us to kind of see them every day. They get out into a pasture. They're checked every day, but sometimes you don't always notice what's going on, what's wrong. So we have groups of bulls and then last year's calves there. And then we have some over by Barry, Illinois, which we've got groups of bulls over there.
Wow. So how many acres do you have total then?
Well, that's kind of I guess it depends upon what all we include in that. It's kind of an odd. It's not a question that's easily answered. We're probably looking at somewhere around 300 if we include that over there that we have for them. Yeah.
Okay. Now you said something about checking pens.
Yes.
That we need to talk about.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting process with them. Since they are a wild animal, and people in Illinois, we're used to white-tailed deer, and they do things very similar to what a white-tailed deer does. And I say that just their behavior this time of year, and actually what the offspring look like. When the calves are born, they're brown, they have white spots on them, just like a white-tailed deer does. Obviously used for camouflage. And just like a deer, the first 24 hours, they're going to hide that calf in the grass. And it makes them very hard to find. And it sounds silly because you think, okay, you've got, and this, because a calf will weigh somewhere between 35 and 55 pounds, and they're mainly legs. But they hide them in the grass, and I will tell you from my own personal experience, more than once I've almost driven over them because they lay that still and the grass is that tall that even though the grass may be green, it's amazing what they do, what their instinct is. And that's obviously different than what you're accustomed to with a domesticated animal. So we actually have paths mowed in our pastures, and every day then we use a Polaris Ranger, and one person drives, one person stands in the back, excuse me, so that they can, the person in the back can be up higher and they can see in the grass and see if there's any hidden in the grass. So it's kind of, there's a spotter and a driver, and then once the calf is found, then you check to see where the cow is or what's going on, and they pick up the calf, put a tag, vaccinate it, and put it back where they found it. If you don't find them in the first 24 hours, you're probably not going to catch them. Once they decide to get up and move, they get up and go, and they're amazingly fast right off the bat. So without having a calf hurt itself, it's really getting them tagged right away is the most important thing. As far as that, then you can leave them alone.
So I imagine you probably spend quite a bit of time checking pens then.
This time of year we do, yeah. They'll spend, and it depends on the day. If because you're checking to see if you saw the ones you saw yesterday and things like that, or you're trying to figure out who the mom is to the calf. Because unlike a beef cow, for example, that if you're putting a calf in that tag's ear, you know who the mom is. She's probably standing right there. It's not a big question. But where they hide their calves in the grass, you don't know whose it is. Sometimes the cow will come running over and you'll know, okay, well that's 408's calf. But a lot of times we have cows that you'll look at and say, I know she calved, and they will intentionally lead you in the wrong direction. When you come in the pen, they'll start racing around at perhaps the opposite side, like their calf is over there. So you'll go over there looking, and we know we've got a couple that do that. So when they're acting like that, their calf probably is not where they are because they're trying to throw you off. Basically, it's kind of it's very strange. So sometimes the cow will come up and you'll know who it belongs to, but sometimes you won't. So it does take a while sometimes just to figure out who the mom is. So, because they're trying to, for the safety of the calf. And the calf, they're very funny because they won't move. You'll You'll pick up the calf, you'll tag it, and sometimes they'll squeal and they'll kick, but then when you put it back in the grass, they'll freeze. So you can lay it on its side with its legs crossed, and it'll lay like that until you're gone.
Wow. That's
The young ones will. It's just the whole instinct thing. It's very different.
Now, I mean, you mentioned that you're mowing these paths through the fields, and you have Polaris Rangers that you're going to. What other special equipment are you using?
As far as far as other actual equipment this time of year, that's really all it takes. We use they carry a metal shield with them, similar to what a gladiator would use, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it sounds silly, I know, but we've got them in different sizes. They're usually about 3 feet tall, sometimes made of aluminum, sometimes heavier gauge stuff. But we'll leave that in the Ranger, and then if we've got a cow who's being aggressive, then there's a way for us or our employees to shield themselves from that. They tend to strike with their front hooves. So if you've got a shield there that you can hold, they'll strike at that, and then you can be behind that, or have the calf behind that tagging it.
Interesting. So sometimes you might have to fend off the cow.
Yeah, they're being protective. Yeah, they're protecting their calf.
Wow, so I guess it kind of takes a bit of a special person to get in there and do that.
I suppose so. Yeah, it's not for. Yeah. You have to. If you understand the animals, it's not a scary thing. It's if you understand why they're doing what they're doing and can kind of anticipate what they might do, it's fine. But it just takes having people that work with you that understand that makes a big difference.
Yeah. So how many people do you have that work with the animals then?
Oh, I would say on a day-to-day basis, to be honest, day in, day out. I've got one young lady here who does the bulk of the feeding and the checking of the livestock, and Lindsay does most of the day-to-day hands-on animal stuff. I have another gentleman here, his name is Mike, and Mike, he's out there with her right now running the pens. Yesterday, or a few days ago, we cut velvet on bulls, and so it was the three of us doing it. So, Lindsay is the main one right now, hands-on, day in, day out, and Mike when needed, and myself as well.
Interesting. Now, you just mentioned cutting velvet on bulls, and that's one of the products that you get from elk.
Right.
Can you explain, all the different things that you get from elk that you're
Absolutely. And the velvet is the antler that grows, and that is the stage of growth prior to the calcification of the horns. So what we do, and what we just did a few days in, which we'll do again next week, is we remove that velvet antler while it's still soft and while it's still growing. That actually has glucosamine and chondroitin in it naturally occurring, so it's used for medicinal purposes. So we remove that antler, freeze it, and then sell it to buyers who will then freeze dry and pulverize it to be encapsulated. Sometimes for human consumption, sometimes for pets.
Interesting.
That's one of the products. We do that for two reasons. One is the bulls, their growth plates haven't fused enough really between the age of 3 that if they get fighting much before that age, if their antlers are allowed to go to hardhorn, we call it, a lot of times they'll fracture their skull plates, and then they'll have a difficult time on down the road just because they're just not done growing yet. And the other, obviously it's a management issue. To have a pen with 50 bulls in it, they'll all have, sharp, pointy antler. For the human standpoint and the animal standpoint, it's a management issue, so we remove the antler for that as well. And then obviously it's an important byproduct for us. The meat is the other thing that we harvest animals for. It's incredibly low in fat and cholesterol for red meat. In fact, from the fat standpoint, it's as low in fat as a turkey breast is, or chicken breast. It's just that lean. So most of our consumers are health conscious people looking for, a low fat, low cholesterol red meat alternative, and that's where a lot of our market is. And as well as a lot of restaurants who are in areas where either wild game or things like that are big.
Yeah. Now, where are you? I mean, you mentioned some restaurants and health-conscious customers. How are you getting your products to them?
Well, we actually have a website that people can order online, but we have a whole separate little group, which these are all family businesses. So it's actually my cousin and her husband who who have developed routes within Illinois and deliver and service our customers from a truck. They're actually retired school teachers, teaching first, second kindergarten for many, many years right outside of Springfield. And they do this now together as a team. And so in addition to the elk meat, they also sell Butch's Pizza, which is made up in Morton, another Illinois product. So they service a large number of grocery stores. Our snack sticks are in a ton of convenience stores, bars, places like that, and then individual restaurants that'll buy steaks or burgers or things like that to serve. So that's, but you can buy it and places like County Market and things like that. Different stores there in Springfield carry our meat frozen. Yeah.
Now, how many pounds of meat are you producing on a yearly basis?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say probably, let me do some quick math in my head here. We'll probably go through somewhere around 40,000 pounds of elk meat. If you include snack sticks, summer sausage, and then fresh cuts. Yeah.
Huh. Now, what's kind of the life cycle of an elk here
Okay.
on your ranch?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know it's going to be born, and
yes,
how many?
Exactly, it is. Yes,
how many years?
That's where it all starts.
From where?
It starts with birth. They're born, and they have a certain calving time of year, and it is right now. They have a calving season, and it is the spring. And obviously, it's going to go back to the fact they were once wild animals, and at this point in their evolution, having been moved primarily, they used to be in all 48 states. They were native everywhere. So it's kind of, people say, well, they aren't from here. Well, actually, they were before we all moved in and pushed them west. If you think about where you see elk wild now, obviously you're talking about out west in mountainous areas and things like that because they can live there. So over time, they've kind of adapted to calving during warmer temperatures, and that increase, obviously has increased their calf mortality there. So that is the time of year that they do that. We'll wean the calves pretty young. We tend to wean them in September, so they'll be born in end of May and June. We'll wean them in September, which is when we take them from the moms, and then they're put in their own pen and given as much feed as they can possibly eat to get them up and going. And they're a year old. They're separated. The bulls and heifers are separated. Heifers kept back usually for replacement heifers, breeding stock, ones that we'll keep here on the farm, and bulls we'll keep and raise. And some we'll keep back for breeding or sell for breeding, and then we'll have those that we harvest for meat.
Now, I know you have a hunting lodge here as well. Do you have hunters come in to?
We don't here,
harvest?
not here at this facility. The hunting lodge that we have is for whitetail deer.
Okay.
Since we're in Pike County, and we have so many deer, and we do, despite what some people may think, there are just a tremendous number of them all over the place. That's actually for our whitetail deer hunters that come. We lease a lot of ground in the area, and they come here to hunt whitetail deer.
Okay, so that's kind of a interesting diversification of what you're doing as well.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that within our little group here. Yeah.
So what other things are you diversifying to kind of keep everything going?
Well, the hunting is obviously one thing. Like I said, we've got our lodge, and we do that, and the elk and the beef cattle, and then the part of the company that started the elk, which is JDL or JDL Longhorn, which does livestock handling equipment. Now does post frame buildings. They build swine management facilities for people. And just about anything you can imagine, selling fence and posts and wire and things like that. So those are kind of the different entities that we have that have all kind of sprouted.
Yeah. Now there's one more question about elk that I wanted to ask you. And, being wild animals, they've got to be trying to escape sometimes.
Absolutely.
Is that a big problem, little problem, or do you...
Even tame animals, even your domesticated beef cattle, if there's a gate open, they're going to walk at it. It's not, yesterday Lindsay spent time trying to get a cow who had gone across a fence where a tree had come down back in with everybody else, and that was a beef cow. So It doesn't matter if it's your pet dog that gets out and runs the neighborhood. Even tame animals try to. So, we have the fences that we have here are 8-foot fences. These animals, we don't really talk about, are very large animals. I think a lot of times we think about elk, we think about deer. Well, yes, but an elk will be the size of a deer when it's about 3 months old. Height-wise, they're the height of a horse. They're very tall. They'll tend to weigh, the cows weigh between 500 and 600 pounds at maturity. A lot of that's leg. They're a very tall animal. And then the bulls are somewhere between 800 and 1,000 pounds. So the fences that we would use to keep beef cattle in, they'll just step over them basically. It's not like it's not really a challenge for them at all. So we do use 8-foot fences, and like I said, our system is set up so that we have gates that lead to alleyways that go from place to place to place. You try to remove as much error as you can, and if it were to happen, it would strictly be a human error issue. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, there's always the joys of giant storms coming through and putting a tree on your fence, which we've had happen before. But, you just try to minimize that chance.
Yeah. Huh. So have you ever gotten the dreaded call from a neighbor that
Yes.
says there's an elk out?
Yes.
And,
Yes, we have.
And
again, it's, I mentioned earlier about being a patient person. If you have beef cows out, you go out there, you get a couple four-wheelers, you get really irritated, and eventually with a bucket of feed, they'll probably come in within, a short amount of time. The difference with elk is they have to come in their own time frame. But they are funny animals, and they are a creature of habit. So if they've been in that pen or whatever for very long, they will make their way back to it. And ours have. We have had that happen. It just takes time, and they'll be out for a few days before you get them back in a lot of times. But they will come back because they're like, okay, that's home. Okay, then I'm gonna go back in there. But then but actually catching them in there is always the big thing, because if they see you coming, they'll take off. So it's interesting. But yeah, I even hate to say it. It hasn't been something we've had to deal with recently. So I don't ever want to utter those words, because anything's possible, especially with the spring we're having and the storms we're having. So,
I mean, in the community you're in now, there's in the recent times, elk aren't exactly common in nature. In
right.
Terms. How are your neighbors dealing with the idea of having elk, right next door?
Oh, I mean, for the most part, they really enjoy it. If they've got family that come to visit them from out of town, they'll drive by to see the elk, or you'll see them in town like, oh, I saw the bulls in that lot, or their antlers are really growing. I can't believe how much they grew from yesterday to today, or I think they truly enjoy them, because they're just amazing animals. You don't see them run very often, but when they're out in the pasture, if something happens to spook them and they run, it's amazing. They're unbelievably graceful. It's, if you're watching a Triple Crown and watching the thoroughbreds run, I mean, bug in my face, wow. Watching those animals run, I mean, they are beautiful and they're graceful and they run, but it just looks like they're just laying it all out there. And elk are so different, because you'll watch them and they'll be from one end of the pen to the other before you realize it, and they don't ever look like they're trying. They're very fast. They run 40 miles an hour, and they can get up to that speed within 3 steps. Yeah. And I've seen it happen, so I believe it now. But they're just a beautiful, graceful animal, and so the people they get a kick out of seeing them. I mean, you get to watch the antlers grow and the elk calves, and so it's a little bit different. So people do enjoy it.
Huh. And now it's a totally different animal, so I imagine you have totally different diseases and other things you need to look out for. Actually,
you'd be surprised. A lot of it's very similar to what you deal with as far as from a disease standpoint, what you would deal with beef cattle. We vaccinate for the same reproductive diseases. We vaccinate our cows for the same things that beef cows might have from that standpoint. Elk can founder just like a beef cow can. There's any number of things that are similar. There are some different things, but honestly, I don't know if it's part of it being a wild animal or what it is, but they're a very resilient animal. Once you get the calves past that weaning time, it's just you just have very few disease problems.
Now, Now, with working with the elk out here, now are there aren't really very many gender roles. I mean, it's both men and women are doing the same things, and it doesn't really matter anyway.
It doesn't.
And you mentioned earlier that there's a certain, you don't want people to be coming to you with knowledge to get a job. What's the thing? I mean, if I wanted to come and work here with elk, what would you want?
Well, first of all, you'd have to be fearless. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think I mentioned patience earlier, and I think as we've had a lot of different people here with us through the years, the ones who have done the best job have been patient and willing to listen. So if you can give me someone who's patient and willing to listen, and in fairly good physical condition, I'm in pretty good shape. Because then you can train him to do what you need him to do. And I don't want to sound gender biased here, but sometimes it's harder with the guys because depending upon what their background is, because they may not have the patience for it sometimes. To just kind of just wait, relax, let them go where they need to go. Then we'll kind of go from there, and it kind of takes that. So, like I said, my primary herdsman, her name is Lindsay. So that kind of at this point in history, that's the case, and she's been with me for a while now, and she loves what she does, and she's very good at and very patient, and yeah. So yeah, gender roles really, yeah, it's really inconsequential. Just someone who's patient and willing to learn and listen. And that's, and it has kind of, there are people who can understand animals or begin to, and that makes a difference too.
Now, are there any government regulations over elk? What can you tell us about a little bit of that sort of stuff?
I'd be happy to. I don't know if that's to say over elk is the best way to say it or not. There's a tuberculosis program just like there is for beef cattle that you're a part of, and you test for TB. We have blood drawn every few years on all the animals, and they're tested. Chronic wasting disease is the other disease that there is a concern with in elk and white-tailed deer. So any animal that is either slaughtered or dies over the age of 16 months is then tested for chronic wasting disease to confirm that wasn't the cause of death. So those two things are the primary things that we deal with as far as what programs are involved with the government.
Okay. And finally, I mean, there's lots of work that you're doing here. What's getting you to get up every morning and come out here and do this?
The alarm clock. It is a family business, so there's a lot of it goes back to that. And I absolutely the animals are whether it's the beef cattle or the elk or the whole thing is fascinating to me. So I mean, it's no different than anybody. There's parts of your job that you like more than others, and I really enjoy being out. Whether it's working beef cows or doing whatever, I really enjoy that part of what I do. So everybody has their thing and their niche, and sometimes your niche shifts a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoy that. Ways to increase your size to compete. It's economy of scale. It's a business. So, I think as time goes on, and that's already happened, in the last 15 to 20 years, a lot of farmers rely upon off-farm income. My husband and I talk about our hobby, our 200-acre hobby farm that we own. We both work full-time to support our hobby. His family farms over that way, but our own ground, that's, we work to support it. So, it's a change.
Yeah. Now, what do you think of the future of this family operation?
Oh, I think it'll change 100 more times.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it will. Again, the one thing leads to another thing. I don't think 20 years ago anyone thought that we would be having this conversation right now. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it'll change again. I'm sure it'll change again. that's how things go, you know. So I don't know. I don't know where it'll all end up. I really don't. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it will be.
I can't sit here and tell you that it'll all be. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, this has been really great sitting and talking with you about your farm, about your ranch. And I have one more question for you.
Yes.
And then we're done. And this is the question I ask everybody. And that is that, this is an oral history interview. And it's going to be, archived, and it's going to be around for eternity. And there's the possibility that your kids, grandkids could, stumble upon this interview and say, hey, look, there's great-great-grandma Jody in
Great-great-grandma Jody.
And it's kind of difficult to think that way, but
yeah, it is.
What's the one thing you'd want them to find in here?
Oh, that's tough. One thing.
It could be a couple. I'll let you have a couple.
I don't even know if I can get down to a couple. Just keep your options open and see where things lead you. I think that's I think sometimes we all get into a niche and a groove and can't see what's going on around us. So I think it's always keep your eyes open. You don't know what's going to be around the next corner, and be ready for it. Things change. And learning how to deal with change and take it as it comes is a pretty important part of life. So, know where you came from, but understand that you don't know where you're going to end up. So.
Great.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Great to sit here and talk with you.
Got one little follow-up. You were a few years ago in animal science.
Yes.
And if I remember right, you were on the livestock judging team.
Yes, I was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I was on both the meats and livestock judging teams in Champaign. And, again, that goes back to what I was saying about meeting people and developing relationships and bonds with people that you have a common interest. And that was really where I found my niche were those people. So, the faculty there are amazing. The gentleman that I worked with, Tom Carr, Doug Parrott. It's one of those things you're like, oh, I hope they stick around, but I know they're both looking at retirement in the not so distant future, so I know my kids won't be there when they are, which kind of makes me sad. But great experience. It's probably some of the best decisions I've made early on in life was to get involved in that. We went places I would never otherwise have gone. You're loading up in a van at 4 a.m. with way too many people and way too little stuff and driving across the country, and amazing stuff. You met people I would never have otherwise met, and just been and done things that I wouldn't have done. So that's the kind of thing that, with my own kids, I say, you just keep your options open. You don't have any idea where you might end up or what might lead to something else. And yeah, I loved every minute of that. But
you can kind of talk a little bit about the judging team process. I mean,
sure.
You're in a pen with 4 beef cattle, say.
Correct.
And you have to decide how to rank their placement and give reasons for that. Can you kind of describe that process?
You bet. With livestock, like you said, right now the way livestock judging contests are set up, it's 3 species. It's beef, sheep, and swine. I look for them to add the goat thing, and they already have in a lot of contests, the meat goats, the boar goats. And it used to be, back in the day, as the guys used to say, that quarter horses were a part of those contests, but that's a separate contest now. But yeah, you've got 4 animals, and they're either market animals or breeding animals. And based upon which one of them they are, you rank those animals in order of, best to worst. In breeding animals, you might have a pen of heifers or ewes or gilts, and you'd look for, characteristics that you would want to see in a breeding female, structural correctness, body capacity, femininity, things like that, as opposed to what you would look for in a market animal. If you're talking about barrows or wethers or steers, then you're looking for structural correctness. Structural correctness is still important, however, growth, muscling, correctness of finish, how much fat they carry, things like that, and you rank them based upon that. Then you take the information from your 10 minutes of standing there and you develop what you refer to as a set of reasons. Why did you place this class this way? And then you go into a little room and you explain to judges why you did what you did. And then they rate you based on how correct you were in what you saw. Amazing experience. I encourage my own kids, if they have any interest in it at all, to get involved in that, because your powers of observation and your ability to think on your feet and speak in front of people, it's a great crash course in that. It truly is. So.
You don't have much time to prepare.
No, you don't have a lot of time to prepare. You're given, if you're giving 4 sets of reasons, you have 10 minutes to look at that class of animals and write down notes, and then you're given a few minutes to look over those notes before you go in and tell them why you did what you did. And there's not a strict format, but there's a pretty basic format that you follow, a 4-paragraph format to describe what you're doing and why you've done it, and then you hope that what you saw is what they saw, and hope that they agree with you. So, yeah, it's an adrenaline thing. It's an interesting thing to do. I think people who don't understand it don't quite grasp what you can get from it.
So there were judging contests that you went to with your teammates on the judging team?
Yes, yeah, we went to contests in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm trying to think of where we went, because I did both livestock and meats, so everywhere from Texas to Pennsylvania and places in between. We attended contests for both those, doing that very thing. But it's, decision-making skills, you don't have a lot of time. You develop ways to do that very quickly and evaluate things very quickly. And but traveling with groups of people that, you don't really know until you're crammed into a van and spending 24 hours a day with them, and staying in cheap hotels and being frightened by the people in the room next door, and eating McDonald's every morning because your meats judging coach loves McDonald's and owns stock in it, so you're going to eat there every morning. I mean, it's just all the stories that come, that you go, they have reunions every year at Champaign, and every 5 years the team, if it's every 10 years, so like on 10 and 20, those teams get up and talk about their judging experiences and stuff, and it's a lot of fun just to go listen to people and hear how things have changed since they started doing it to the way it is now, and what hasn't changed. But yeah, the relationships that you build with those people you're just there with, that's a really cool thing too, and how far and how different your lives are after that, and where people end up. It's the people that I judged with, and yeah, it's really neat. Still stay in contact with a lot of them. So.
Was Doug Parrott your coach?
He had a graduate assistant that traveled with us named Stan Tarr, who I will actually see tomorrow. But yeah, Doug was the primary coach then, and then when I did meets, Tom Carr was the one who, and still does, travels with the meets judging team. And then my senior year, they do what's called meat animal evaluation, which is a combination of livestock and meats contest, and Doug Parrott and Tom Carr were the 2 coaches for that. So yes, I spent time with Dr. Parrott, yeah. He is a character. He cracks me up. I thoroughly enjoy we see him at cattle shows and stuff, and I always get such a kick out of seeing him. So yeah, great experience. One of the best I've had. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.